Good morning again, everywhere at least from the East Coast of the United States morning. I'm here with Sandra Panton. And Sandra is a certified master life coach and an advocate for youth and parents. And this is, as a parent myself, this is a topic I'm very connected and interested in. So I can't wait to hear more about what you have to share with us, Sandra.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Nice to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to kind of share some insights. So as you said, I'm an advocate for youth because I never had anyone standing up and advocating for me, right? So I always believed that my life would have been woefully different if I'd had someone, even just one person, to walk alongside me, to believe in me, to kind of coach me into better mindset, making better decisions. Because it's like I say, kids are not bad. It's just that they're kind of lost in this vortex. They're confused, they're disconnected. So to have one person that cares, at least one person that cares, that will walk alongside them to show them that they're worth the effort and they're worth kind of standing up for, advocating for, then it will make a world of difference in their life. But also on the parent side, because the parents don't necessarily know how to parent, right? It's a sink or swim kind of thing, right? You go based on the best you can with where you are at that moment. We don't really have a strategy for parenting. Mm. But there's nothing else in life that we kind of do, hopefully, that we don't have a strategy for. We have a career strategy. I know what I want to do and what steps I need to do to get there. I know measurements. Well, 2 years later, am I much closer to the goal? We don't kind of sink or swim with our careers or our relationships in any other way, but we kind of do that by default with our kids because we don't know that we could have a strategy. So my goal is to help parents kind of develop a strategy around their values, their desires, to kind of have the conversations with the adolescents, because how are you planning their life without them having any input? But a lot of times we have desires for our kids. I want them to be this, or I want to make sure that they're not this because of what I went through, but they don't have the benefit of the discussion or the conversation. And we mentioned yesterday them being empowered. It's very disempowering for somebody to stand over you and make decisions for you and talk about you like you're not in the room, right? And we as adults don't like that. We wouldn't want our boss or anybody else planning our career without our input, but we're planning their life a lot of times without their input. And maybe when they hit the high teens, okay, now what do you want to do with your life? But you've never let me think about that up until this point. So now when they hit the teens or the 20s, now they have to start exercising that part of their brain to be strategic and to think and make good decisions and come to conclusions. But that part of the brain is still kind of dwarfed because we never let them exercise it. Right. Mm-hmm. So I love what you had mentioned before, that your parents kind of said, okay, we're here, we're the parents, we understand there's a role, but we're here to empower you. We're here to kind of walk alongside you to get you to where you want to go. And if we see that you're making a decision that we know is not in your best interest, then that's a discussion. It's not a mandate. And depends on his age appropriate. Yes, there are mandates, because you're not going to let a little child put their finger in the socket to just experiment to see how it works out, right? So there are boundaries around that. But as they get older, those boundaries get wider because we're developing their ability to think for themselves and make their own decisions, because we want them to be adults who are confident and bold and willing to take a risk, because we've let them kind of take risk and fail and succeed and kind of see what that feels like. And now their brain is rapidly writing code, as I like to say, so they know how to handle those situations as they go forward.
So I heard a phrase once called the gift of failure. Tell me how you relate to that when it comes to children.
It is a gift, because that's what forges us like steel, right? So failed relationships are not failed relationships, they're opportunities to learn from. Whether you learn to, okay, why did I make that decision? Why did I get into that relationship? Why did I choose that job? Was it because of my insecurity and my need to belong, to connect? Or was it because I really thought that that was a thought out decision? Depends on the answer to that, then you adjust, right? So we want to make sure that they do fail and they're allowed to fail, and that they don't feel like a failure because they failed. So it's not, we want to kind of, we have bad connotations when we hear the word fail, right? But we want to really help them understand that that's a dynamic word. It's not just a negative. You, as long as you learn something from that, that was not a failure. It's
Mm,
like you fall down and you don't get back up, then yes, you chose to fail. But if you get back up and say, okay, what can I learn from that? That was a lesson. It wasn't a failure. And we want
yeah.
to make sure that they have that perspective because they are self-condemning and they get that from their environment. So if they're raised in an environment where it's not failure, it's a learning experience, now they bounce back and they automatically say, what can I learn from that? And they pivot and adjust. If they're in an environment that says failure is bad, then they're going to fall down. They're going to take much longer to get back up. They're going to condemn themselves. Their self-talk is always going to be negative. Their insecurities are going to grow. Their confidence is going to be depleted. It's weakening them because now they feel like they've disappointed the parent. They're ashamed to compare to their peers, to hold them up against the world. Now it's a shame and blame thing. And it's the same circumstance, but two different kids raised different mindsets are going to bounce differently from that same experience. So failure is necessary.
Yeah. I find that when I'm sharing with my kids, when I share it, like, I see that they're going through something and I want to help. But of course, as soon as I start talking at them and get in the mode of I'm teaching them something, they turn off. And as
Exactly.
soon as I start to go and talk about a life experience that I've had that I can, that I relate to, and then they can then decide what they want to learn from that, all of a sudden the light bulb goes on and they're listening. So with that caveat, I'm curious, do you have an experience in your life where you did have one of those, this feels like a failure, but man, what a gift it is?
Wow. Um, well, it's kind of a weird come around,
Mm,
and it's going to encompass a few things that I kind of like to bring to the forefront. I always say that we want to make sure that our children know our story,
mm,
because a lot of times we're talking to them because of our history. I know if you do that, you make that choice where it's going to lead because I made the same mistake or my parents made the mistake. So I'm trying to prevent you from making that mistake. But the best way to get them to hear you is for you to share your story, because now they see it in a human way and it's not a judgment. It's not you trying to fix me. It's you sharing with me and helping me grow and kind of sealing maybe some of the cracks and insecurities that they've developed over time. My family has a lot of secrets. I never knew much about my mother's upbringing at all. I mentioned yesterday that my parents split when I was very young, so I wasn't raised by my mother. Um, so maybe once a year, twice a year, we would see her for maybe a couple hours, and that was it. So never got the chance to know any of her background. No stories were told. And I knew her mother, my grandmother, but again, there was a distance. We didn't win proximity, so didn't really have any bond with her. But there was a point when my grandmother got older and my mother brought her up to live with her for a while in the US. And I happened to be there, and I saw the way that my grandmother treated my mother. And even though my mother and I were not tightly bonded, she was still my mother. So I still had like a loyalty, and I would go up in arms for anybody that said anything against my mother, or I saw her in any kind of pain or any kind of results from the way somebody dealt with her. And I couldn't stand my grandmother. And my mother wouldn't say anything to her, but I would go toe to toe with her for my mother.
mm,
And I never really had any love for my grandmother because she seemed to despise my mother. And my mother was the one in her older age that was taking care of her. She built her a house. She made sure she had food. She was always shipping her stuff when she lived in the West Indies. She was always doing the daughterly stuff, taking care. No one else did that for her. I was like, how can you not appreciate that this person who never graduated from high school, she thinks she got her high school diploma when she was in her 60s. just to say that she could, right? So she's been hustling, doing everything. She's put forth everything that she has, and you show no appreciation. There was years later, like I'm in my 30s, 40s, maybe in my 40s. And I'm driving through because I'm a woman of faith, right? So I talk to God all the time. So I'm driving into church one day and I get the impression, call your mother and invite her to go on vacation with you. So I'm to God, like you're not talking to me, because my mother and me in the same space, that's not going to end well. So I keep getting this pressure. And I'm like, okay, Lord, you know what? I'm going to do it because she's going to say no. But at least I can say I was obedient. I called her. She said, yes, I want to go. I'm like, man, really? Really? So we end up being a family trip. We flew to North Carolina to my sister. We drove from North Carolina to Florida, where she wanted to go to the Holy Land, which was the TBN kind of amusement park, spiritual amusement park back in years ago. I think it's closed now.
Okay.
So we're there staying with her sister-in-law, who I didn't know before. So we're in the house, we're sitting at the dining room table, and I had cooked and we're talking, and my aunt says to my mother, it just a random conversation, and hopefully this isn't too deep. Do you remember that how your grandfather raped your mother? And I said, and then they just keep talking. Like they just said, pass the cheese. And I went, excuse me? And I look at my sister, and my sister's saying, yeah. And I looked at my mother's laughing. I said, excuse me, how do I not know this story? So it turns out that my grandfather didn't know how to take no for an answer. Let's just put it that way. And that's how my mother came into existence. And that's why my grandmother despised her. Because every time she saw her, she was a reminder of what happened. So I said, had you told me that, I wouldn't have despised her. I would have understood her. And distinctly, I hear Lord saying to me, I don't ask you to need to understand anything. When I ask you to love people, you love people. So a lot of times we see, whether it's parents and how they're raising their kids, we don't know the backstory. We see the way kids are reacting. We don't know everything they've experienced, because a lot of times they shut down and they're not talking because of shame and all of the situations. So we want to get out of the need to have to understand, to have empathy, the need to understand for me to reach you or extend myself a little further for you. We just want to know that you're here, you're in my space. That means we're together for a purpose. Even if it's just for a season or a reason, there's something that you can draw from me and I can draw from you. Mm. So I always say to parents, as is age appropriate, you want to have these discussions, because now I understand my mother better. Now I understand why she wasn't a huggy, kissy kind of mother, because she never got that. And because of how do you live as a young woman who your kids are constantly reminded of you because they know? How do you go through school with that, right? And now I understand things better, but we must get out of the position where I need to understand you for me to respect you, for me to show you love, for me to extend myself to you. So I really say for parents, share the stories, as again is age appropriate, but you want to be able to have the child grow up knowing that you see them, that you really understand. You're not just preaching to me or trying to control me. You're actually seeking my best good. So you want to be able to just be vulnerable with them, right? Some parents say too much, and then the kids have too much weight too early. But you want to see, depends on the situation, depends on the story, depends on the application at that moment. Because my mother grew up extremely leery of men and not able to really have trust in that type of relationship. She didn't have that ability, and she would always tell us to be leery of them, but she never told us why. And when you come up telling your kids, just don't be around boys, don't be around girls, be careful of this and that, and you're not telling them the consequence, the why, they're going to most likely go towards whatever you tell them to not go towards, right? So you want them to kind of hear you. They've got to have some backstory to it. Why? And whenever I teach kids, I said, I'm not here to tell you what to do, and I'm not here to fix you. You're not broken. I'm here to give you some information and some research and to kind of open your mind to another perspective. And you get to choose which door you go through.
Yeah.
And that's empowering for them.
That is a very, very powerful message that you just shared there, Sandra. I got all the goosies as you were talking. It's someone said to me once, don't get mad, get curious. And that's there's an oversimplistic energy there, but that to me is permeating in what you just expressed there is rather than controlling, rather than getting mad, rather than there's nothing wrong with seeking to understand, but to
Yes.
lead
How
with,
you do it.
and to lead with that empathy and that respect first
Mhm.
for everyone, kids, not only kids included, especially kids,
Definitely.
is
So
powerful.
knowing the kid is acting out, there's a backstory.
Mm,
So don't respond to what I call the symptom. If they're slamming doors and shutting down, that's just a symptom of something deeper. Don't focus on the slamming doors. Yes, respect is necessary, but you don't want to spend all your energy focusing on they must just respect me, because that becomes about me.
right.
I want to understand, why are you slamming the door? Why are you saying that you hate me? Why are you not communicating? Why do you never want to go meet new people? Why? There's always a backstory. Another story comes to mind.
Mm,
Not for me, but for another youth. She was younger and she was staying with extended family. She loved animals, just was the most curious, giggly little girl, would just go out. She wants to feed all the animals. She wants to be in the garden. She's doing all of these things. And the female in the house, the mom, has a son. And they were always a couple years apart, go feed the dog and tend to the goats and whatever. So the little girl was out there loving it. And then all of a sudden, she never wanted to go outside anymore. And she would avoid any chores. And they're having a problem with her. Like, you're lazy and what is going on? And you think you have a free ride and all of these things going on, and just was demonizing this girl. And I would talk to her in the process, but she wouldn't really say anything. Fast forward, she's now 13. So that was maybe when she was 6, 7. We're walking, talking, and she says, do you know why? And I said, why? Because he started to touch me. And I didn't want to be out. Anytime there was animals or anything, the association is every time I go outside now, he's touching me. I said, why didn't you say something? Because that was the woman in the house son. And they make up stories. Oh, you're going to throw me out. You don't like me. It's my fault. It's something I did. And they take blame and shame for that. I said, and you've held that for all of these years. And it's just now that she's able to speak it. And only because I'm always kind of coaching out and hearing the stories, and we would go walking together. And when you're in community with them, when I'm coaching kids, it's not, I always tell them, I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to walk alongside you. What do you want? What makes you happy? What bothers you? And sometimes I have one young lady now, she has me reading books, and around the book come out stories. I said, well, how would you handle that? And what did you think about that? And oh my gosh, really? They did this? What does that say about friendship? That's not loyalty. Do you think that's loyal? Do you think that's nice? And through the medium of the shows that she likes and the books she has me reading, and now that's around our coaching sessions, but now I can pull out nuggets as opposed to me sitting face to face and say, well, did you have any challenges with your friends this week? Or, how's the grades going? This is another way that she just blossoms and she opens up. And now they got her report card and said, she is a changed child. The teachers all said in her report, we don't know who this person is, because she's voluntarily sitting to the front of the classroom, which is one of the first things I told her to do because she was being distracted, sitting with her friends. I said, you get to choose. Are your friends going to be paying your paycheck? Are they going to be going to college, doing your work for you, right? Are they going to be So she immediately sat to the front of the class. They're like, what child sits to the front of the class? But that's one of the things I always coach my kids to do for you. And most of
Mhm.
the time they'll do it. And now they're saying this child she's completely different, outgoing. She's much more resilient. And this is the goal. It takes simple, simple things. So
Yeah.
when you're talking to your kids, walk with them. I always say, when I'm coaching families, do something, depends on their lifestyle, depends on what I recommend, and without fail, 100%, they'll come back to me and says, oh my gosh, I just learned, or oh my gosh, we're now talking and giggling. And now instead of parents and kids sitting in events like this, now the kids leaning up on the parent, or
Mm.
you see them arm in arm. And now you see that bond developing that before everybody was just kind of technically here, but they kind of everybody had their walls up. You just
That's
got to tell
amazing.
the stories. Just tell the stories. Just have the conversations and the encounters, and you'll see amazing. But really note that if something is going on with your child, it's a symptom of something deeper.
Yeah, that's a great, that's a huge message. I think that's a great way to wrap up actually, is to say that to us one more time.
If you see something going on with your child, whether they're saying they hate you, they're slamming doors, they're not talking, there's any resistance in an area that flags to you, don't waste the energy, extend the energy focusing on the behavior, because the behavior is just a symptom of an emotional trauma, something that's going on deeper. So
Mm,
you find a way to get to the root. Just like if we have a disease, we're not looking to just not sneeze anymore. We want to know, why am I sneezing? And you want to get to the root cause.
wow, Sandra, thank you so much. This is so profound in what you're expressing, and I appreciate your energy and your time being here with us. I'll tag you in the interview. The Facebook Live's not working, so I'll post the recording and tag you. And can you let people also know how they can get in touch with you here on the interview?
Okay, so I'm on Facebook, Sandra M. Panton, because there is another Sandra Panton.
Okay.
Or you could go to my website, sandrafosterconsulting.com, and you can connect with me there.
Perfect.
Email sandra@sandrafoster.com.
Okay.
Sandra Foster. Sandra@sandrafosterconsulting.com.
Beautiful. And you can post all of those links in the comments as well. That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Empowered Soul Network. Hope you got something out of that. I know I did. And I really enjoyed and appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful being here.